Woman poses on her porch in 1911. The window reflection made experts freeze. What if I told you that a simple family photograph from 1911 has been baffling experts for over a century? Today, we're diving into one of the most unsettling photographic mysteries ever discovered. A woman proudly posing on her porch for what should have been an ordinary portrait inadvertently captured something in a window reflection that still sends chills down the spines of everyone who examines it closely. Before we begin this journey into the unexplained, if you enjoy mysterious and thought-provoking content like this, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel grow. And speaking of growth, I'm also developing another channel focused on historical true crime stories. Link in the description if that's something you'd be interested in. Now let me take you back to a warm September afternoon in 1911, in the small town of Millbrook, Connecticut, where what started as a celebration of a new home purchase would become one of photography's most enduring enigmas. The morning fog had barely lifted from the Connecticut hills when antique dealer Rachel Hartley arrived at the Blackwood estate. It was April 2019, and the last descendant of the once prominent Blackwood family had passed away, leaving behind a Victorian mansion filled with over a century of accumulated history. Rachel specialized in vintage photographs and had built her reputation on finding hidden treasures in estate sales. The Blackwood sale had attracted dealers from across New England, all hoping to find something valuable among the dusty relics. "Third floor is mostly photographs and personal effects," the estate sale coordinator told her. "Haven't had time to catalog everything up there properly." Rachel climbed the narrow servants' staircase, her footsteps echoing in the empty house. The third floor had clearly been used as storage for generations. Boxes were stacked floor to ceiling, trunks lined the walls, and the musty smell of old paper filled the air. In a corner, she found what she was looking for: several boxes labeled family photographs. She began sorting through them methodically. Formal portraits, vacation snapshots, holiday gatherings spanning decades. Then her fingers stopped on a photograph that seemed different from the others. It was larger than most, mounted on thick cardboard backing. The image showed a woman standing on a wraparound porch, her hand resting on an ornate column. She wore the high-necked dress typical of the 1910s, her hair arranged in the Gibson girl style. Behind her, the house's windows reflected the afternoon light. What caught Rachel's attention wasn't the woman or her clothing, it was the quality of the photograph itself. Despite its age, the image was remarkably clear, almost unnaturally sharp. Every detail was preserved: the texture of the woman's dress, the grain of the porch's wooden boards, even the delicate lacework of the curtains visible through the windows. On the back, in fading brown ink, someone had written, "Catherine Blackwood, September 15th, 1911, first day in our new home." Rachel held the photograph up to the window light and gasped. In the large window, directly behind Catherine, the reflection showed not the expected view of the yard and trees, but something else entirely. The reflection seemed to show the interior of a room, but not any room that should have been visible from that angle. She pulled out her jeweler's loupe for a closer look. The reflected room appeared to be furnished differently than the rest of the house, with furniture styles that seemed older, more austere. And there was something else, a figure barely visible standing in the reflected room. "Find something interesting?" Rachel jumped. A man in his 60s stood in the doorway, wearing a visitor's badge that identified him as Professor James Morton from Yale. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he said. "I study historical photography. That particular image you're holding, may I?" Rachel handed him the photograph. Professor Morton examined it carefully, his expression growing more intrigued by the second. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "The plate clarity, the chemical composition visible in the tones. This was taken with a very specific type of camera, a Gandolfi, if I'm not mistaken. They were known for their exceptional glass plates." "What about the reflection?" Rachel asked. Professor Morton studied the window area with her loupe. His face paled slightly. "That's unusual. The angle of reflection is all wrong. Windows don't reflect interiors from that perspective. They reflect what's in front of them." They stood in silence, both staring at the impossible reflection. Finally, Professor Morton spoke again. "Would you consider letting me borrow this for analysis? I have colleagues at Yale who specialize in photographic anomalies. I'll pay you a rental fee, of course, and return it within a week." Rachel hesitated. In her experience, truly mysterious photographs were rare and valuable, but the professor's offer was generous, and she was curious about what modern analysis might reveal. "All right," she agreed, "but I want to be involved in whatever you discover." Professor Morton smiled. "I wouldn't have it any other way. In fact, I think you should know, this isn't the first Blackwood photograph to show unusual properties. There were stories years ago about the family having a connection to certain unexplained incidents in Millbrook." As they carefully wrapped the photograph for transport, Rachel noticed something she'd missed before. In the lower corner of the image, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was a small mark, like a handprint on the glass, but from the wrong side. The drive back to New Haven was quiet, both of them lost in thought about what they'd found. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that in that reflected room, frozen in silver and time, something was terribly wrong. The figure in the reflection seemed to be watching, waiting, as if aware that after more than a century, someone had finally noticed it was there. As they passed through the old mill towns of Connecticut, Rachel found herself wondering about Catherine Blackwood, standing proud on her porch in 1911, completely unaware of what the camera had captured behind her. Or had she known? The woman's expression, which had seemed simply formal at first glance, now appeared to hold a hint of something else. Tension, perhaps, or fear. What had happened in that house? And what was that room that shouldn't have been there, reflected in a window that should have shown only sky? Yale's digital imaging laboratory was a testament to how far photographic analysis had come since 1911. Professor Morton led Rachel through rooms filled with spectrometers, electron microscopes, and computers running advanced imaging software. "My colleague, Dr. Sarah Chen, is our expert on early 20th century photographic techniques," Morton explained as they entered the main lab. Dr. Chen, a woman in her 30s with intense dark eyes, was already examining the Blackwood photograph under a specialized scanner. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen said without looking up. "The silver halide patterns are consistent with 1911 processing, but the clarity is extraordinary. Whoever took this photograph was a master technician." She gestured them over to a monitor displaying a highly magnified version of the window reflection. "Now, this is where it gets interesting. See the reflection? The room shown here doesn't match the interior layout of a typical 1911 colonial revival home like the Blackwood house." Rachel studied the screen. The reflected room appeared sparse, almost cell-like, with bare walls and a single wooden chair. The figure standing in the room was clearer at this magnification, a woman in a dark dress, her face turned away from the window. "Could it be a double exposure?" Morton asked. Dr. Chen shook her head. "I thought so at first, but look at this." She pointed to the edges where the reflection met the window frame. "In a double exposure, you'd see overlap, transparency. This is a perfect reflection, just reflecting the wrong thing." If you're enjoying this mystery so far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Dr. Chen pulled up architectural records on another screen. "I found the original blueprints for the Blackwood house. That window should reflect the front yard and the street beyond. The angle is all wrong for it to show any interior room, let alone one that doesn't match the house's layout." Rachel remembered something. Professor Morton mentioned the Blackwoods had connections to unexplained incidents. What kind of incidents? Morton pulled out a folder he'd brought from his office. "I did some research after we left the estate. The Blackwood family was prominent in Millbrook from the 1870s onward. Catherine Blackwood, the woman in the photograph, was married to Theodore Blackwood, a successful industrialist, but there were stories." He spread out newspaper clippings and documents. One headline from the Millbrook Gazette, dated October 1911, read, "Strange occurrences at Blackwood residence. Neighbors report unusual sights." The article described how neighbors had reported seeing lights in the house when the family wasn't home, and figures in windows that disappeared when approached. One witness claimed to have seen a woman in an upstairs window standing perfectly still for hours, even though Catherine Blackwood had been confirmed to be across town at the time. "But here's the truly strange part," Morton continued. He pulled out a photograph from the 1890s showing the same house. "This is the Blackwood property 20 years before Catherine's photograph. Look at the windows." Rachel and Dr. Chen leaned in. The house looked almost identical, but there was one major difference. Where the large window in Catherine's photograph stood, there was only a solid wall. "They added that window during renovations in 1910, Morton explained. "Just a year before this photograph was taken, Dr. Chen had been running more tests while they talked. I've found something else. The light patterns in the reflection don't match the time of day the main photograph was taken. Based on the shadows, Catherine's portrait was taken around 3 p.m., but the light in the reflected room suggests early morning, maybe 6 or 7 a.m. Different times captured in the same image?" Rachel felt a chill. "That's impossible." "It should be," Dr. Chen agreed. She pulled up another analysis. "But look at the spectral analysis of the reflected area. The chemical signature is slightly different, as if this part of the photograph was exposed to a different light source entirely." Morton was searching through historical records on his laptop. "Found something. In 1891, 20 years before Catherine's photograph, there was a tragedy at the Blackwood house. A housemaid named Mary Sullivan died under mysterious circumstances. She was found in a locked room on the 3rd floor, dead from unknown causes. The room was subsequently sealed off during renovations." Rachel looked at the reflected room in the photograph again. The sparse furnishing, the cell-like quality. Could that be the sealed room? But how could it appear in a reflection of a window that didn't exist when Mary Sullivan died? "There's more," Morton said quietly. "I found Mary Sullivan's employment records. Look at her photograph." He showed them a small, grainy image from an employment agency. Despite the poor quality, the resemblance was unmistakable. The figure in the window reflection looked exactly like Mary Sullivan. Dr. Chen stood up abruptly. "I need to run one more test. This equipment can detect latent images. Sometimes old photographs contain visual information that's not visible to the naked eye." She initiated a deep scan of the photograph. As the results appeared on screen, all 3 of them stepped back in shock. The scan revealed multiple latent images throughout the photograph, all centered around the window. Faint impressions of the same figure, Mary Sullivan, appeared in different positions, as if the photograph had captured her moving through the reflected room over a period of time, all compressed into a single image. "Leave a comment about what you think is happening in this photograph." "This is scientifically impossible," Dr. Chen breathed. "A photograph captures one moment. It can't show movement over time like this." Morton was pale. "Unless we're not looking at a normal photograph. There are theories about locations that act as recording devices, places where traumatic events leave impressions that can be captured under the right conditions." Rachel thought about Catherine Blackwood standing on her porch, having her picture taken on what should have been a happy day. Did Catherine know? When she posed for this photo, did she know what might appear? They would need to dig deeper into the Blackwood family history, into the circumstances of Mary Sullivan's death, and into the nature of that mysterious window that seemed to be a portal not through space, but through time itself. The Millbrook Historical Society occupied a small brick building on Main Street, its archives holding 2 centuries of the town's history. Rachel and Professor Morton arrived early on a grey April morning, meeting the Society's director, Eleanor Patterson, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s. "The Blackwood family records," Eleanor mused. leading them to a climate-controlled storage room. Yes, we have quite a collection. They were one of our founding families, though the last decades were complicated. She pulled out several boxes of documents, photographs, and personal correspondence. Theodore Blackwood donated these himself in the 1950s, shortly before his death. He seemed very anxious that they be preserved, though he was quite specific about which items were included. Rachel began with Catherine Blackwood's personal diary, handling the fragile pages carefully. The entries from 1911 started optimistically, discussing the house renovations and plans for the future. But by September, the tone had changed. September 10th, 1911. The new window has been installed in the east parlor. Theodore insists it will brighten the room, but I feel uneasy when I pass by it. There is something about the way the light falls that seems unnatural. September 13th, 1911. I cannot shake the feeling that we are being watched. Yesterday I saw a figure in the window's reflection, but when I turned, no one was there. Theodore says it is my imagination, but I know what I saw. September 15th, 1911. Mr. Harrington came to take our photograph today to commemorate the completion of the renovations. I stood on the porch as he requested, but I could not bring myself to look at that window. Even from outside, I feel its presence. Theodore says I'm being foolish, that Mary's death 20 years ago has nothing to do with our new window. But why then did he insist on placing it exactly where her room used to be? Morton looked up sharply. So they did know about the connection to Mary Sullivan. Eleanor nodded gravely. There were rumors that Theodore Blackwood's father, Augustus, had been involved with Mary Sullivan. Some say romantically, others suggest something darker. She died under mysterious circumstances, and the room was sealed immediately after. Rachel found a folder labeled Architectural Plans, 1910 Renovations. Inside were detailed drawings showing the window installation. A handwritten note in the margin caught her eye. Glass to be specially prepared, according to HP's specifications. Payment rendered as agreed. HP? Morton wondered aloud. Eleanor's expression darkened. That would be Henry Pittman. He was, well, today we might call him a paranormal investigator. Back then he styled himself as a psychical researcher. He was obsessed with the idea of capturing evidence of the afterlife through photography and other means. She retrieved another box, this one containing correspondence between Theodore Blackwood and Henry Pittman. The letters revealed a disturbing plan. Pittman had convinced Theodore that by installing a specially treated window at the exact location of Mary Sullivan's sealed room, they could create what he called a temporal lens, a way to photograph past events that had left strong psychic impressions. If you're still following this mystery, please subscribe to the channel. These deep dives take a lot of research. The technical details in Pittman's letters were fascinating and disturbing. He described coating the glass with a solution of silver nitrate mixed with other chemicals, including some derived from organic sources he didn't specify. The glass was to be exposed to specific light wavelengths during certain lunar phases before installation. "This is madness," Morton muttered, reading through the pseudoscientific explanations. Yet, something clearly happened. Rachel found Catherine's diary entries from after the photograph was taken, September 20th, 1911. The photograph came out wrong. Everyone who sees it becomes disturbed, though most cannot say why. I know why. She is there, in the window, watching us as she has watched us since the glass was installed. Mary Sullivan will not rest. September 25th, 1911. Theodore has had the photograph locked away, but it is too late. I see her now even without looking at the window. She stands in that horrible room, waiting. Last night I heard tapping on the glass from the inside. The diary entries became increasingly frantic over the following weeks. Catherine reported seeing Mary Sullivan throughout the house, always connected somehow to reflections, in mirrors, in water, in polished surfaces. Then, abruptly, the entries stopped. The next item in the archive was a newspaper clipping from November 1911. Mrs. Theodore Blackwood suffers nervous collapse, sent to Hartford Sanitarium for rest cure. Eleanor showed them one final document, a letter from Theodore Blackwood to Henry Pittman, dated December 1911. Your experiment has destroyed my wife's sanity and my family's peace. The window has been removed and destroyed, though I fear the damage is permanent. That accursed photograph remains as evidence of our folly. I should burn it, but something stays my hand. Perhaps future generations will understand what we have done better than we do ourselves. Mary Sullivan deserves justice, but this was not the way. Morton sat back, overwhelmed. So they deliberately created a window designed to capture, ghosts, past events, and apparently succeeded beyond their wildest nightmares, Rachel added. She thought of the multiple exposures Dr. Chen had found Mary Sullivan moving through time in that sealed room, somehow captured in a single photograph. Eleanor had one more revelation. Theodore Blackwood lived to be 93. In his final years, he became obsessed with the photograph. His nurses reported that he would stare at it for hours, claiming he could see Mary Sullivan moving in the reflection, that she was trying to tell him something. What happened to Catherine? Rachel asked. She never fully recovered. She spent the rest of her life in various institutions, drawing the same image over and over. A woman standing in an empty room, viewed through a window. She died in 1943. Still drawing. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor handed them a manila envelope. There's one more thing. This came to the Historical Society just last month, donated anonymously. The note said it belonged with the Blackwood collection. Inside was another photograph, this one dated 1935. It showed the Blackwood house from the street. Where the special window had once been, there was now a solid wall again. But in the bricks, if you looked closely, you could see a pattern, the faint outline of a figure, as if burned into the masonry itself. The shape was unmistakably that of a woman in a Victorian dress, standing eternally in a room that no longer existed. Back at Yale, Dr. Chen had assembled a team of experts to examine the Blackwood photograph using every available technology. The lab buzzed with activity as specialists in optics, chemistry, and digital imaging worked to unravel the mystery. I've never seen anything like this, said Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist specializing in light behavior. He pointed to a spectrographic analysis on his monitor. The window area shows light patterns that violate basic optical laws. It's as if the glass is reflecting light from a source that isn't there, or more precisely, from a source that was there at a different time. Dr. Chen had been analyzing the chemical composition of the photograph itself. I've found traces of unusual compounds in the emulsion, particularly concentrated around the window reflection. Some of these aren't standard photographic chemicals from 1911. What are they? Rachel asked. That's just it. I'm not entirely sure. There are organic compounds here that are degraded beyond full identification, but she hesitated. Some of the markers are consistent with human biological material. The room fell silent. Professor Morton was the first to speak. You mean Pittman's organic sources might have been... We can't know for certain, Dr. Chen interrupted, but the spectral analysis suggests proteins and other compounds that could have come from blood, hair, or other human tissues. Dr. Webb had been running computer models trying to recreate the optical conditions that could produce the photograph's anomalies. I've modeled every possible scenario, double exposure, trick photography, dark room manipulation. Nothing explains what we're seeing. The only way this image makes sense is if the window was actually showing a different time and place. Rachel pulled out her laptop and showed them something she'd discovered. I've been researching Henry Pittman. He wasn't just a psychical researcher. He was a former photographer who became obsessed with capturing images of the dead after his own daughter died. He spent years experimenting with different techniques. She showed them excerpts from Pittman's journals. which she'd found in an archive at the University of Connecticut. His experiments had grown increasingly extreme, involving everything from electromagnetic fields to chemical compounds derived from cemetery soil. But one entry stood out. The barrier between past and present is thinner than we imagine. Like a palimpsest, moments layer upon one another, and with the right chemical key, we can cause earlier layers to bleed through. The Blackwood window will be my masterpiece, a permanent aperture through which the past can speak. Dr. Chen made a disturbing connection. A palimpsest is a manuscript where earlier writing shows through despite being erased. If Pittman thought of time the same way, he was trying to create a temporal palimpsest, Morton finished, a surface where past events could bleed through into the present. The team worked through the night, running test after test. Around 3 a.m., Dr. Webb made a breakthrough. "Look at this," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I've been analyzing the light wavelengths in the reflection microscopically. The window isn't reflecting one time, it's reflecting multiple moments simultaneously, all from the same location, but different times." On his screen, he showed a breakdown of the reflected room. By isolating different wavelengths, he could see multiple versions of Mary Sullivan, standing, sitting, walking, lying on the floor. All these moments were compressed into the single image, creating the ghostly figure they saw. "My God," Rachel breathed. "It's not just a photograph of a ghost. It's a photograph of 20 years of moments, all captured at once. Leave a comment about what you think. Could such technology actually exist?" Dr. Chen had been reviewing the historical records Rachel and Morton had brought. According to Catherine's diary, the strange phenomena continued even after the photograph was taken. If the window really was acting as a temporal lens, taking the photograph might have activated something. Morton nodded grimly. "Like opening a door that couldn't be closed." As dawn broke over New Haven, the team sat exhausted but unable to stop discussing the implications. If Pittman had indeed created a method to photograph across time, what else might be possible? And more disturbing, what had happened to Mary Sullivan in that room that left such a strong impression that it could bleed through decades later? Dr. Webb pulled up one final analysis. "There's something else. The figure of Mary Sullivan in the reflection, she's not just standing there randomly. Look at the positions across the different time captures." He created a composite showing all the positions Mary had occupied in the reflected room. When overlaid, they formed a pattern. She seemed to be repeatedly moving from the door to the window, as if trying to get out or trying to get someone's attention. "She was trapped," Rachel said quietly, "and somehow she's still trapped in that image." The photograph lay on the examination table, innocuous looking in the bright laboratory lights. But now they all knew better. It wasn't just a picture. It was a window, a recording, and possibly a prison, all captured in silver and glass on a September afternoon in 1911. And somewhere in those layers of time, Mary Sullivan was still trying to tell her story. Rachel couldn't sleep after the revelations in the lab. Something about Mary Sullivan's pattern of movement in the photograph nagged at her. At 6 a.m., she was back at her computer, searching through genealogical records and old newspaper archives. What she found made her immediately call Professor Morton. "I've discovered something about Mary Sullivan. She wasn't just a housemaid. She was pregnant when she died." Morton's sharp intake of breath told her he understood the implications. Augustus Blackwood? The timeline fits. Mary died in May 1891, and she would have been about 4 months pregnant. The death certificate lists sudden illness, but there's a coroner's note suggesting possible poisoning. They arranged to meet at the Millbrook Town Hall, where birth and death records were kept. The elderly clerk, intrigued by their research, helped them locate records from 1891. "Here," Morton said, finding what they were looking for. "Mary Sullivan, age 22, found dead in her room on May 15, 1891. But look at this. There's an addendum filed a week later. The addendum, written in a shaky hand, noted that Mary had been found clutching a letter. The letter itself wasn't preserved, but its existence was recorded, along with a note that Augustus Blackwood had demanded it be destroyed. "Cover up," Rachel said flatly. "She was murdered." They were interrupted by Dr. Chen calling. "You need to come back to the lab immediately. I found something extraordinary." Back at Yale, Dr. Chen was practically vibrating with excitement. "I've been analyzing the photograph all night with new filters, and I found text embedded in the image. It's incredibly faint, but it's there." She showed them the enhanced image. In the reflected room, barely visible on the wall behind Mary Sullivan's figure, were words that seemed to have been written over and over. "He killed us." "Us?" Morton questioned. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "The plural is deliberate. Remember, Mary was pregnant. Rachel felt sick, so Augustus Blackwood killed Mary to hide their affair and her pregnancy. Then his son Theodore, whether from guilt or curiosity, worked with Pittman to create this window. But they got more than they bargained for," Morton added. "They didn't just capture Mary's image, they captured her testimony." Dr. Chen had more to show them. "I've been corresponding with a colleague in Germany who studies temporal anomalies in photography. He suggested looking at the photograph under very specific conditions, mimicking the light wavelengths that would have been present at dawn on the day Mary died. She adjusted the laboratory lights to match those conditions. The effect was immediate and chilling. Mary Sullivan's figure in the reflection became clearer, more defined, and she was no longer alone. A second figure appeared in the reflected room, a man in Victorian-era clothing, his face obscured, but his posture threatening. He stood between Mary and the door, blocking her escape. "Augustus Blackwood," Rachel whispered, but Dr. Chen wasn't finished. "Watch what happens when I cycle through the light conditions from dawn to dusk on that day." As the lights shifted, the scene in the reflection played out like a horrifying flipbook. Augustus entering the room, Mary backing away. A struggle, Mary falling, Augustus leaving. And then Mary alone, dying, crawling toward the window that wouldn't exist for another 20 years. "She's been trying to tell this story for over a century," Morton said quietly. "Trapped in that room, in that moment, waiting for someone to see, to understand." Rachel remembered something. The flowers on Father O'Brien's grave. No, wait, wrong mystery. But Theodore mentioned in his letter that Mary deserved justice. Did he know his father was a murderer? They returned to the Blackwood family documents. In Theodore's personal papers, they found a confession of sorts, a letter never sent, addressed to the Millbrook police. "I have carried this burden too long. On his deathbed, my father confessed to killing Mary Sullivan and her unborn child. He poisoned her when she threatened to expose their affair. I was only a boy, but I knew Mary. She was kind to me. When Henry Pittman approached me with his theories about capturing the past, I saw a chance for Mary to tell her own story. I did not anticipate the horror it would bring to my family. The window worked too well. It showed not just Mary, but the crime itself. My wife saw it all again and again until it drove her mad. I am a coward. I cannot go to the police, cannot destroy my father's name, my family's reputation. So Mary remains unavenged, and we remain cursed by our complicity. The investigation had revealed the truth, but Rachel realized it brought no peace. Mary Sullivan and her unborn child had been murdered, their killer never brought to justice. The Blackwood family had been destroyed by their guilt and their misguided attempt to make amends. And the photograph? It remained what it had always been, evidence of a crime, a cry for justice, and a window into a past that refused to stay buried. As they prepared their final report, Dr. Chen made one last observation. "You know what's most unsettling? If Pittman's process really worked, if he really found a way to photographically capture past events, then this photograph might not be unique. How many other images might be out there, showing things that were never meant to be seen?" Rachel looked at the Blackwood photograph one last time. In the window reflection, Mary Sullivan stood eternal, a witness to her own murder, waiting for a justice that would never come. Or perhaps, Rachel thought, the photograph itself was a kind of justice, the truth preserved in silver and light, impossible to deny or forget. So there you have it, the chilling mystery of the 1911 Blackwood photograph. What started as a proud woman posing on her porch became a window into one of history's most disturbing photographic anomalies. Was Henry Pittman's temporal lens real? Did Theodore Blackwood and his experimentations with treated glass actually capture moments from the past? Or are we looking at an elaborate hoax that somehow became more than its creators intended? The evidence is compelling. The chemical anomalies Dr. Chen discovered, the impossible optical properties Dr. Webb documented, and most haunting of all, the revelation of Mary Sullivan's murder, hidden in the layers of time within that reflection. What do you think? Is it possible that certain locations, under specific conditions, can photographically record traumatic events? Or is there another explanation for what we see in that window? Leave your theories in the comments below. I read everyone and love hearing your perspectives on these mysteries. The Blackwood photograph remains in Yale's collection to this day, still defying complete explanation. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary moments, a woman posing for a picture on a sunny afternoon, can reveal the most extraordinary secrets. Whether you believe in temporal photography, psychic impressions, or simply think this is history's most elaborate photographic trick, one thing is certain: Mary Sullivan's story, hidden for so long, has finally been told. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of photography's strangest mysteries, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We have more incredible historical mysteries coming up, including a photograph from 1923 that seems to show a building that wouldn't be constructed for another 50 years. Until next time, remember, every old photograph tells a story, but some tell stories that were never meant to be discovered. Total word count: approximately 5,000 words across all chapters.